Well, good morning and welcome to Thursday again. I think a relatively straightforward weather brief here today, but I guess it's safe to say for most of us, quite a bit cooler start of the day than it has been over the last several. And I'll talk more about that in a second. We had much of this spring season. We have seen a roller coaster ride with temperature from cooler than normal to warmer than normal. And of course, this past week was a great example of that. We started cool, and then summer came again, paid a visit here over the weekend and into early this week. Temperatures once again hit in many spots, upper 80s, some cases actually 90 for a high again. So unusual for this time of the year, for the end of May. And really the beginning of June, but it has to do with the jet stream pattern across North America and unusually large amplitudes, so large ridging and troughing features that have been present. And depending on where you are relative to one of those features, we go above and below, and not as much in between. But for the past week, given a cool start and a very warm summer-like finish to the week, mean temperatures for the week ranged from a couple of degrees below normal, which is almost, it's difficult to believe, but up in the western upper peninsula, you can see some greens and blues there. And over most of lower Michigan, things were warmer, conditions were warmer, and you can see we had some fairly significant positive departures, typically 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above the normal. Now, if we look at growing degree days, and I won't show you the map here just to save time, but our growing degree day departure as of the beginning of June, starting at the beginning of May. So we think about an annual planted crop at the beginning of May. It looks a lot like this map. And so for most of the state, we are anywhere from a couple days behind up in the far northwestern part of the state to several days to as much as a week ahead of normal, with a surplus of degree days as we move in, again, over much of lower Michigan. And the surpluses generally are higher the farther south you go and east you go in the state. So again, it looks a lot like this pattern with our mean temperatures for the past week. Precipitation wise, it was for most areas another wetter than normal week, with 1/2 to 1 inch totals over most areas. But we did have, with the weather system that passed to our south last weekend, we did have some banded rain, and you can see a couple spots here with some yellows here. More than 2 inches fell, and in a lot of areas it was a steady rain, but again, above normal totals. And for many areas, it continues a wetter than normal trend that goes back a long ways. But other spots, central lower Michigan here, you can see many areas that had less than 1/2 inch. So it did vary quite a bit based on location. On the weather map here this morning, the frontal boundary that went through the state, or the cool front that went through the state, now is off to our south and east. You can see approaching the Ohio Valley. There's an area, a little embedded area of low pressure here, and you can't see this because it's in the upper air, but there's also a weak upper air trough, or a little upper air disturbance that's moving across the region this morning, and that is setting off here down the lower left an area of generally light rain. Now, a couple things that are important about this is it follows that front, and it looks a lot more impressive than actually what is hitting the ground. It's falling into relatively dry air near the surface. So yes, the radar is picking up rainfall here. This line, again, you can see southwest and northeast across a lot of lower Michigan, but as it falls into the dry air, it's evaporating. And so most of what we're seeing at the surface is, some cases you could just see virga. The rain's not hitting the surface, but a few sprinkles or some light rain. This is not again, it looks a lot more than what it really is occurring. There are a couple spots where you might get some heavier rain, but it won't be very long. This area should be moving eastward, as you can see here, over the next couple of hours, and then out of the state. And for the central and southern part of the state, we should see some clearing this afternoon. Now, the other piece of today's forecast, again, given mostly high pressure, is that there's cold air aloft because of an upper air troughing feature. And in northern parts of the state, I would not be surprised to see some scattered showers or isolated showers break out this afternoon when we get peak heating during the day. And if that happens again, it probably will be confined, will be very scattered at best. Central and southern parts of the state will remain dry after the middle or the latter part of the morning. Moving to tomorrow morning, by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, you can see basically no greens, no precipitation expected. Friday will be a mostly sunny and cool day. The other thing to note about this is you can see there's another frontal boundary that's expected to pass through the state, a secondary cold front, a little bit of a wind shift line with that, but there's no moisture for it to work with, so that will come through dry. The reason I bring this up, there will be some pressure difference there. It will be a pretty windy day tomorrow, and probably looking at 15, 20 mile per hour westerly winds during the day tomorrow, maybe some higher gusts during the afternoon. So that's, again, there were some questions about spraying. That will definitely be an issue for most of the daytime hours tomorrow during the day Friday, even though it will be sunny and dry. Then the dry conditions continue on into Saturday, at least for the first part of the day. But you can see here off to our west, the next weather system getting its act together here, organizing out of the central Great Plains. That will begin to cause an increase in cloudiness by the PM hours on Saturday, and at least the chance for some light rain or showers by late evening, but primarily overnight hours into Sunday. That's when it looks like right now rainfall would be most likely with this. There will be a rainfall threat statewide with this, but I think the greatest chances will be in central and southern portions of lower Michigan here, especially on Sunday. Now, note also on Saturday morning, you've got a stationary front down to our south. That boundary is going to be sitting there for the next several days, starting on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And there will be ripples of low pressure moving along that. And what that means is a prolonged, unsettled period from Sunday through, again, probably Wednesday of next week, with several chances for rainfall. So it looks as though, and this is especially relevant for people who have been missed by the recent rainfall, it does look like most of the state will see some precipitation with this, especially in the southern half of the state. I think we're looking actually at high probability of rainfall, and again, several chances Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday type time frame. It'll actually, it's a little difficult at this point in time to do the timing very well or forecast it, but it's likely that we will see some significant precipitation here during that time frame. First one I wanted to bring up here for the rainfall event, for that leading edge of precipitation that we talked about on Saturday night and Sunday. These are forecast totals between 8 a.m. Saturday and Sunday. So again, most of this is overnight on Saturday, but you can see here that at least for at this point, the central lower peninsula, you've got a solid quarter to half inch of rainfall expected during that first wave. And there will be more coming after that, again, Sunday, Monday, on and into Wednesday. And so here's your weekly total through next Thursday morning. And again, much of this area, at least a half to an inch over portions of central and southern lower Michigan. And it'll be spread over, again, a relatively long time frame. Temperature-wise, it's also going to be cooler, certainly, than it has been over the last few days anyway. Looking at temperatures generally today, mostly in the 60s to low 70s for highs, and then low temperatures in the 40s and 50s from north to south across the state, and will stay there for most of the next several days. So really, temperature departures for the next several days, we might even be a couple degrees below the long-term normals. And that sets us up here looking beyond this into our medium range with some, I would call them somewhat new developments, but consistent, and I think a direction which there's more confidence in. But if we look at the upper air, the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks are almost identical, which gives us a little bit more confidence. But you can see in the jet stream pattern here on the left-hand side here, a troughing feature over eastern and central North America, including the Great Lakes region. And that's pretty strongly suggestive of cooler than normal. We're going to get some Canadian air, or at least one, if not more, Canadian origin air masses moving along the northern fringe of the tier of the U.S., including Michigan. And again, not a surprise at all, but on the upper right-hand side here, our mean temperatures are forecast to be cooler than normal. And that's also the case for the 8 to 14 day time frame. The other part of that type of pattern is that there probably still will be an active storm track through the Midwest during this time frame. with more frequent than normal chances for precip. And if that sounds familiar, think about the pattern we talked about early in the week. Probably at least normal, if not above normal precipitation totals. So what the medium range guidance is really, really strongly suggesting at this point is that the next couple of weeks are pointed at cooler and wetter than normal conditions here, and maybe an extended period. I would even call it most of the first half of the month of June. Now, what about beyond that? Well, there's still La Nina is still with us, despite the efforts of the forecasters to wipe it out and have it go back to neutral. It continues. It's probably not going to have much of an impact, though, or influence on our weather here in the upper Midwest, but still the long lead outlooks still do go back to warmer than normal. And I want to finish here with a change. This is the new adjusted or modified long lead outlook, both for the month of June, which is on the top two panels with mean temperatures and precipitation, and then the existing June through August seasonal outlook. And the changes, the monthly outlook here is modified at the end of there's a second issue at the end of the month. And this one came through and is actually somewhat different than what we saw just a week and a half ago. When it was first published, you can see now that the June outlook calls for normal to below normal temperatures. That's a change. It was normal to above normal mean temperatures just, again, 2 weeks ago. This is a direct reflection of some of that guidance you just saw with the medium range. And it's saying that because of the conditions in the first half of June, the forecasters are pretty confident that the mean for the whole month is going to still remain below normal, despite, again, what happens in the second half of the month. But a lot of that is based on a cooler than normal start to June. So that's right now, I think that's one of the major take homes with the guidance is we likely are going into a cooler and wetter than normal pattern. But the long leads still for the remainder of the growing season, getting into late June, July, still call for warmer than normal conditions. That's certainly the case for July, with no direction on precipitation. You can see the equal chances of below, near, and above normal in the lower right-hand side here. So once in a while, we don't see it that often, but once in a while, we do see big changes in a relatively short time frame with this, and that's because of those changes in the medium range here just over the last several days. So summarizing here today, cooler type of weather stretch here that we're looking at. Some scattered showers here this morning in the south, and then maybe in northern parts of the state this afternoon. Mostly sunny, dry and windy tomorrow, and then more of the same on Saturday, but with increasing clouds later in the day as that next weather system moves in, and then probably some rainfall overnight Saturday into Sunday, with a continuing threat for rain into early next week, and temperatures remaining a couple degrees below the long-term normals here. One last thing I did, there are some upper 30s possible here for low temperatures overnight Friday and Saturday in interior areas of the northern parts of the state primarily. We might see some patchy frost, but at this point in time, that would be it. It would be very, very localized, I think. It's not a widespread freeze threat or anything like that. But anytime we look at 30s in early June, this is something to keep in mind. But I think it will all be very, very localized if we see anything like that. And it would be confined only to northern parts of the state. And finally, as the medium range said, first half of June, plan for probably a little bit cooler and wetter than normal conditions here, being a likely bet. And with that, I'll wrap up and bring our next week's speaker. Dr. Marty Chilvers is going to be with us next Thursday morning to talk about white mold management in soybeans. So again, that's 1 week from today. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over, I think, to Phil.